Hello! Welcome to this podcast called Finding Inspiration. It's a 20 or so minute weekly podcast where we interview someone with an amazing story. After the show, I know you're going to feel energized, invigorated, and inspired. I'm Jennifer Weissmann. Welcome to Finding Inspiration.
That would be, a bold-faced lie. It was a random sequence of events. I was born in Israel, grew up in Africa, then in Europe, then in the US, then back in Switzerland, then in Israel, then in the US. So it was all over the place. And by the time I came to the US last time was 30 years ago. I did a postdoc and I had an expertise actually in conflicts of law and conflicts between religious and secular law. And that led to a number of requests to help write new constitutions, first in Eastern Europe when the countries were emerging after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and in Africa. And that in turn led a law firm that I'd started to receive requests to help with countries that were rebuilding for whatever reason, shattered economically, politically, and so on. And we developed in the mid-90s, this is the predecessor to this foundation, we developed essentially knowledge platforms. Our approach was the non-World Bank approach. We didn't just fly in experts. We essentially developed this knowledge platform, which we would license to these countries and say, here are the tools that your people need. We're happy to train them in the tool, but then we're going to disappear and you do your own development. You don't really need outsiders to tell you what to do. And that was at the core. That was in the 90s. And it got us also involved. I ended up getting involved in the mediation in the civil war in Angola, for example, between the government and the UNITA rebels of Savimbi. That kind of intersection between development and conflict mediation that started in the mid to late 90s. And when the foundation then launched in 2008, it was launched on the basis of that knowledge platform that we had. So the idea that you're centering development around that next generation was always core to it. So I can't tell you that I always wanted to do this kind of work. I was simply a lawyer. And I thought I'd stay in academia when I lived in Israel. And then, it was very random or serendipitous that I got involved in this kind of work. But for the last 25, almost 30 years now, there's been some form of this development and conflict mediation that's been part of my life.
So I want to talk for a minute about the book that you wrote, Proof of Life. Take us kind of through a summary, how it happened, how you were contacted about this American man, Paul, who disappeared in Syria. So talk us through that, how this case came to be for you.
Okay. So